I didn't argue when my daughter's boyfriend stood up in front of a room full of investors and accused me of embezzling $50,000 from her company. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look angry. I simply reached into my jacket, pulled out my phone, opened a folder, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Daniel, before we talk about missing money, we should probably talk about your real name. And your wife in Nevada. And the other 2 women you're currently engaged to under different identities." The room went dead silent. Daniel's smile vanished. His face drained of color. And that was just the beginning. Let me rewind 6 months, because none of this started at that podium. My name is Thomas Hale. I'm 61 years old, and until 2 years ago, I was a forensic accountant. 35 years of tracking corporate fraud, internal theft, and financial manipulation taught me one thing better than anything else: the most dangerous people are never the loudest ones in the room. They're the calm ones. My daughter, Lily, is my only child. She's 31, sharp as a blade, and stubborn in the way only intelligent people can be. After graduating with honors and spending a few years climbing the ladder at a major firm, she walked away to start her own tech consulting business. I didn't love the risk, but I respected the courage. Over 5 years, she built something real. Small at first. Then stable. Then impressive. By last spring, she'd secured outside investment and was preparing to scale. New office. New hires. A public-facing launch event. That's when Daniel entered her life. She met him at a startup mixer. He introduced himself as a growth strategist who'd helped take multiple companies from seed funding to acquisition. Confident. Polished. Effortlessly charming. The kind of man who speaks just enough to sound impressive, but never enough to be pinned down. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Within 2 months, he was living in her condo. The first time I met him was at a Sunday dinner Lily hosted. He shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye, and complimented my watch. A small thing, but it told me he was observant. Calculated. During dinner, he spoke about his past ventures. Big names. Big numbers. But every time I asked a specific question, timelines, partners, legal structures, he redirected smoothly. Never defensive. Just evasive. Lily noticed. "Dad," she said, smiling tightly, "can you not turn dinner into an audit?" I backed off. She was an adult. She'd earned my trust. And maybe I was just struggling with letting go. By early summer, Daniel was deeply embedded in her business. He wasn't officially on payroll, but he attended meetings. Reviewed projections. Suggested restructuring cash flow. Lily said he was helping her think bigger. "He sees potential where I get stuck in the details," she told me. That sentence bothered me more than anything else. Details are where the truth lives. In June, she casually mentioned that Daniel had suggested adding him as a temporary signatory to the business account to help streamline vendor payments during expansion. I told her not to do that. She laughed and told me I was being paranoid. A week later, she did it anyway. The launch party was scheduled for August. Investors, clients, partners, everyone who mattered to her future would be there. 3 days before the event, Daniel called me. "Thomas, we need to talk. Privately." We met at a quiet cafe near my house. He arrived early, already seated, a stack of papers neatly aligned in front of him. He slid them toward me. "Lily asked me to review the accounts. There are some discrepancies." I looked down. Bank statements. Transfer records. Highlighted entries. $50,000, withdrawn in increments over 3 months. Transferred to an account bearing my name. I didn't feel panic. I felt recognition. "This isn't real," I said calmly. He sighed, as if burdened by responsibility. "I hoped you'd have an explanation. I don't have access to Lily's funds." "You do," he replied, sliding another document forward. "She added you as a backup signatory when the investors came in." Just in case. I stared at the page. Forgery. Clean. Convincing. I haven't touched her money, I said. He leaned in slightly. Look, I don't want to involve Lily. She idolizes you. This would destroy her. Then he delivered the line he'd clearly rehearsed. If you return the money quietly, we can restructure Access and move forward as a family. There it was. Not justice. Control. I asked to see the original bank logs. He refused. I pulled out my phone and told him I'd call the bank myself. For the first time, his expression flickered. If you do that, he said softly, I'll have no choice but to tell Lily what I found. And the police. And the investors. He paused. I'm planning to propose at the launch party. That's when I understood everything. If I fought him, he'd frame me publicly. If I stayed silent, he'd lock himself into her life permanently. I went home and made 3 phone calls. By that evening, I knew the truth. The transfers never happened. The authorization codes didn't exist. Daniel's identity, however, barely did. The name he used was 5 years old. No childhood records. No college transcripts. A manufactured credit history. His real name was Aaron Cole. 42. Wanted in 2 states for financial fraud. 3 known aliases. Same pattern every time. Fast romance. Access to finances. Isolation of family. Public pressure. Disappearance. The FBI had been tracking him loosely, but he stayed just mobile enough to slip away. Until he chose my daughter. I didn't tell Lily. Not yet. She wouldn't believe me. Not with how deeply he'd embedded himself. Instead, I prepared. The morning of the launch party, I met with federal agents. They equipped me with a recorder and a plan. All I had to do was let him talk. The gallery was packed that night. Lily looked radiant. Nervous. Proud. She hugged me when I arrived. Thank you for coming early, she said. Daniel's been incredible. I don't know how I got this lucky. My heart sank, but I smiled. An hour in, Daniel found me near the back. This is your last chance, he whispered. If you disrupt tonight, I will ruin you. I looked at him. Aaron, I said quietly. He froze. I know about Nevada. And Colorado. And the woman in Phoenix who lost her company because of you. His jaw tightened. You have nothing. I have everything, I replied. And you're about to confess to it. He laughed nervously. You think people will believe you over me? That's when Lily took the stage. And Daniel followed. He took the microphone, wrapped an arm around her, and smiled at the crowd. Before we celebrate tonight, he said, there's something difficult I need to address. My recorder was running. He turned toward me. With great regret, I've uncovered evidence that Thomas Hale has been siphoning funds from this company. Gasps rippled through the room. Lily looked at me, confused, hurt. I stepped forward. I didn't argue, I said calmly. I didn't shout. I pulled out my phone. I just came prepared. I spoke clearly. Daniel isn't your name. Aaron Cole is. And you're currently married. And engaged to 2 other women. And wanted for fraud. The room fell silent. He lunged. Federal agents moved in. Badges flashed. Handcuffs clicked. Lily collapsed into a chair. The truth detonated around her. In the weeks that followed, everything unraveled. Fake documents. Fake lawyer. Fake love. The charges stacked up. At trial, Lily testified. So did 4 other women. Aaron Cole was sentenced to 17 years. Lily rebuilt. Our relationship healed. Trust returned. A year later, she stood on that same stage, this time to celebrate growth, not survival. She thanked her team. Then she thanked me. For protecting me when I couldn't protect myself. Some people think winning means destroying your enemy. They're wrong. Winning is keeping what matters most. And that night, I didn't lose my daughter. I got her back. The night the agents let him out, Lily didn't cry. Not at first. She stood perfectly still in the center of the gallery while people whispered around her, while investors avoided eye contact, while the future she thought she was stepping into collapsed in real time. I walked toward her slowly, afraid that if I moved too fast, she might pull away. "Dad," she said without looking at me, her voice hollow, "tell me this isn't real." "I can't," I replied softly. "But I can tell you it's over." That's when she broke. She folded in on herself like the strength had finally run out, like her body could no longer hold up the weight of betrayal. I caught her before she hit the floor and held her while she sobbed into my jacket, her hands clenched like she was trying to wake up from a nightmare. The party ended quietly. No music. No speeches. Just stunned guests filtering out, murmuring apologies and sympathy. Several investors stopped to speak with Lily. To my surprise, none of them blamed her. One of them, an older woman who'd built and sold 2 companies of her own, leaned in and said, "This doesn't define you. How you handle the next 30 days will." That sentence stayed with Lily. The FBI agents stayed late, collecting documents, freezing accounts, securing computers. Lily answered every question, even through tears. She didn't defend him. Not once. That told me everything. In the days that followed, the truth came in waves. The lawyer Daniel had introduced her to wasn't licensed anywhere. The partnership documents were expertly formatted but legally meaningless. His email address traced back to a temporary server overseas. The office lease Daniel claimed to be negotiating never existed. He had been building a cage, not a future. Lily moved in with me temporarily. She said she didn't want to be alone with her thoughts. At night, I'd hear her pacing the hallway, replaying conversations, second-guessing every moment. "I ignored so many signs," she said one night, sitting at the kitchen table long after midnight. "Why didn't I see it?" "Because he didn't want you to," I said. "And because you trusted him." "That's not a flaw." She shook her head. "It feels like one." The trial took months. During that time, Lily worked harder than I'd ever seen her work. She rebuilt investor confidence personally. She hired an independent forensic firm to audit every transaction. She cut off anyone Daniel had introduced her to and started fresh. When she testified, she didn't look at him. She looked at the jury and told the truth. How he'd listened. How he'd encouraged her. How he'd slowly convinced her that anyone who questioned him was threatened by her success. Other women testified after her. Different cities. Different names. Same story. When the verdict came down, Lily didn't cheer. She closed her eyes and exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for half a year. 17 years. Enough time to rebuild. Enough time to heal. A year later, she held another event in that same gallery. This time, it wasn't about promises. It was about results. Her company had doubled in size. New clients. Clean books. Real growth. When she took the stage, she didn't mention his name. She mentioned resilience. Boundaries. Trust earned slowly. Then she looked at me. "My father once told me that love isn't always comfortable," she said. "Sometimes it questions you. Sometimes it protects you even when you don't want it to." She smiled through tears. I didn't understand that a year ago. I do now. After the applause faded, she hugged me and whispered, "You saved me." I shook my head. "No," I said. "You listened. Eventually. That's what saved you." Some lessons come gently. Others come like a public accusation under bright lights. But if you're lucky, they leave you stronger than before. And every Sunday now, when Lily comes over for dinner, she laughs again. Really laughs. That's how I know he didn't win. Not even close. In the weeks after the sentencing, life didn't magically return to normal. People think justice is a clean ending. A verdict, a number of years, a gavel strike that closes the book. But for Lily, for me, it was more like learning how to walk again after a long illness. Slow. Unsteady. Quiet. She went back to her condo eventually, but she didn't sleep there for the first few nights. Said the walls felt different. Like they remembered him. I helped her pack away the things he'd left behind: clothes, books, a watch she'd once given him as a birthday gift. She didn't want to throw them out herself. Not yet. I boxed everything without comment. Some silences are kinder than words. One afternoon, as we were finishing, she stopped me. "Dad," she said, holding up a notebook. This was in his desk. Inside were handwritten notes. Names. Dates. Small diagrams mapping relationships and money flows. Her name appeared more than once, circled, annotated. She stared at it for a long time. "I was never his partner," she said quietly. "I was a project." "Yes," I replied. "But one he failed to finish." That mattered more than she realized. The FBI contacted her again a few months later. More victims had come forward after the trial coverage. Some were still unraveling the damage he'd caused. Lily agreed to speak with 2 of them privately. She was nervous before the first call. "What if they hate me?" she asked. "What if they think I was stupid?" "They'll recognize themselves in you," I said. "And that will help them heal." I was right. After the call, Lily sat on the couch, eyes red, but her posture straighter. "They weren't angry," she said. "They were relieved. Like hearing my story gave them permission to forgive themselves." That's when something in her shifted. She stopped framing the experience as something that happened to her, and started seeing it as something she'd survived. Her business grew steadily after that. Not explosively. Not recklessly. Steady growth, rooted in systems she now understood deeply. She hired slowly. Trusted cautiously. Asked hard questions without apologizing for them. And she started teaching. Once a quarter, she spoke at small entrepreneur meetups. Not about success. About risk. About manipulation. About how confidence can be manufactured, and charm can be weaponized. She never named him. She didn't need to. One evening, almost a year to the day after the launch party, she asked me to walk with her through the gallery that had become her company's headquarters. The bench where we'd sat that night was still there. She ran her hand along it and smiled. "I almost sold this place," she said. "It felt cursed for a while." "What changed?" "I realized it wasn't where I lost something," she said. "It's where I learned who I could trust." She looked at me. "Starting with you." We sat for a while without speaking. At some point, she leaned her head against my shoulder, the way she used to when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms. "Next time," she said softly, "if my instincts and yours don't match, I promise I'll slow down and listen." I smiled. That's all I ever wanted. People still ask me about that night sometimes. About what it felt like to stand there, accused in public, knowing the truth would surface. I tell them the truth. Fear is loud. Confidence is quiet. And the people who try to destroy you rarely imagine you might already be 10 steps ahead. Daniel Aaron, whatever name he answers to now, thought he was exposing me. What he forgot was that my entire career was built on watching men like him believe their own lies. He didn't forget that I loved my daughter. He forgot that love makes you patient. It makes you observant. And when the moment comes, it makes you prepared. That's how it ended. Not with shouting. Not with revenge. But with the truth, spoken clearly, at exactly the right time. Time has a way of softening the sharpest memories, but it doesn't erase them. Sometimes, when Lily and I sit together in silence, I can tell she's thinking about how close everything came to collapsing. Not just the business. Her sense of judgment. Her belief in herself. The quiet confidence she used to carry without thinking about it. Those are the hardest things to rebuild. One evening, months after everything had settled, she asked me something I hadn't expected. "Did you ever doubt me?" she said. "Not him. Me." I thought carefully before answering. "I doubted the situation," I said. "I never doubted you. Even when you pushed me away, even when you didn't listen. I knew the version of you underneath all of that was still there." She nodded slowly, like she was storing that answer somewhere safe. That was when I realized something important. What hurt her most wasn't that she'd been deceived. It was that she'd briefly stopped trusting her own instincts. So I made it a point, from then on, to never say "I told you so." Not once. Not in my head. Not out loud. Instead, when she asked for my opinion, I gave it plainly and let her decide. And when she decided differently, I respected it. Trust, once cracked, needs room to breathe. About a year after the sentencing, a letter arrived in the mail addressed to Lily. No return address. Prison stamp. She didn't open it. She handed it to me, unopened, and asked, "Can you get rid of this?" I took it outside and dropped it into the shredder without reading a word. Some people don't deserve an audience. Life moved forward. Lily began dating again, slowly, carefully. She didn't hide it from me, but she didn't overshare either. Boundaries, healthy ones, had become second nature to her. The first time she brought someone new to Sunday dinner, she watched my face closely. I smiled. Not because I approved or disapproved, but because she was watching, because she cared. That told me everything. Her company hit another milestone not long after. A major contract. National exposure. The kind of success she used to dream about quietly. That night, she called me. "I did it," she said. "And I did it clean." "I never doubted that," I replied. She laughed, a real laugh, the kind that carries relief instead of adrenaline. Sometimes I think about how easily the story could have ended differently. If I'd panicked. If I'd confronted him too early. If I'd gone to Lily without proof. Truth is fragile when emotion gets involved. Timing matters. People often ask me what the lesson is. I don't give them a slogan. I tell them this. Pay attention to the person who asks you to isolate yourself from those who love you. Be wary of anyone who resents questions. And never confuse confidence with honesty. As for me, I returned to a quiet retirement. Gardening. Reading. Long walks in the evening. But every so often, when Lily calls to ask my opinion on a contract or a new hire, I feel something settle in my chest. Not pride. Gratitude. Because in the end, this story wasn't about catching a criminal. It was about a father and a daughter navigating the moment when trust is tested, strained, and if you're lucky, strengthened. He tried to take her future. He failed. She kept her business. She kept her integrity. And I kept my daughter. And that's a victory no accusation could ever take away. Years later, people would still ask Lily about that night. Not in interviews. Not publicly. In quiet moments. After meetings. Over coffee. In the hallway when no one else was around. They'd lower their voice and say things like, "How did you know?" Or, "How did you survive that?" And Lily would always pause before answering. "Because I wasn't alone," she'd say. Even when I thought I was. She never dramatized it. Never turned it into a legend. The people who knew the full story understood why. When you've lived through something that nearly takes everything from you, you don't need applause. You need peace. I watched her become that kind of leader. The kind who listens more than she speaks. The kind who asks for documentation without apologizing. The kind who can sit in silence and let other people reveal themselves. One afternoon, several years after the trial, she asked me to walk through the office again. Not the gallery anymore, the building had grown. New floors. New teams. New energy. But the bench was still there. She'd had it restored instead of replaced. You know, she said, sitting down, sometimes I think about who I would have been if he hadn't shown up. And? I asked. I think I'd be less careful, she said. And I don't mean that in a good way. She looked at me, thoughtful. He didn't make me smaller. He forced me to grow up faster. That might have been the moment I truly stopped worrying about her. Not because the world had become safer, but because she had become stronger. As for me, I stopped thinking about him almost entirely. People like that want to live forever in your memory. They believe attention is power. The most complete defeat you can give them is forgetting they ever mattered. On rare occasions, his name surfaced, an appeal denied, a sentence extended, another victim discovered. Each time, Lily acknowledged it briefly, then moved on. No flinching. No spiraling. Just forward motion. On her 40th birthday, she hosted a small dinner. Close friends. A few long-term employees. No speeches. No announcements. Near the end of the night, she raised a glass. To the people who ask the hard questions, she said. And the ones who stay, even when it's uncomfortable. She met my eyes. I didn't clap. I didn't need to. Later, as we cleaned up, she caught me looking around the room. What? She asked. I smiled. I was just thinking, I said. About how close we came to losing all of this. She nodded. Yeah, she said. And how close we came to losing each other. We stood there for a moment, the quiet kind that only exists between people who've survived something together. If there's one thing I've learned since that night, it's this. Truth doesn't need urgency. It doesn't need volume. It doesn't need theatrics. It only needs patience. Because lies always rush. They push. They corner. They demand belief now. Truth waits. And when it finally speaks, it doesn't ask permission. It ends the conversation. That's how it ended for him. And that's how it continues for us. Quietly. Honestly. Together. There's a moment that still comes back to me sometimes. Not the accusation. Not the arrest. Not even the courtroom. It's a small moment, easy to miss. It happened about 6 months after everything was over. Lily and I were at a cafe, the same one Daniel had chosen when he thought he was controlling the narrative. We hadn't planned it that way. It was just convenient. Halfway through our coffee, Lily went quiet. I waited. Finally, she said, "You know what scares me the most?" "What?" I asked. "That I didn't fall for him because he was extraordinary," she said. "I fell for him because he made me feel understood." That's when I realized how close she'd come, not just to losing money or reputation, but to losing her sense of self. Manipulators don't take things by force. They replace reality slowly, one reassuring sentence at a time. I told her something then that I hadn't said before. People like him don't create false versions of you, I said. They reflect the parts you already have and then exploit them. Your ambition. Your generosity. Your desire to be seen. Those weren't mistakes. She nodded, eyes wet, but steady. I don't want to become closed off, she said. I don't want fear to be the lesson. Then don't let it be, I replied. Let discernment be the lesson. That distinction mattered. Years passed. Her company grew into something she once would have thought was out of reach. Not because she chased growth blindly, but because she built it deliberately. Contracts were reviewed. Backgrounds were checked. Authority was shared, not surrendered. And something else changed too. She became the person others came to when something felt wrong. Employees trusted her. Partners respected her. Young founders sought her advice, not because she was flawless, but because she was honest about what she'd survived. One afternoon, I overheard her on a call. "You're not crazy," she said gently to someone on the other end. "And you're not weak for questioning this. If someone pressures you to decide quickly, that's already your answer." I sat there quietly, realizing she'd internalized the lesson completely. Not bitterness. Wisdom. As for me, I've grown older in the way that feels earned. I don't replay that night with anger anymore. I don't imagine alternate outcomes or sharper words I could have used. Everything happened the way it needed to. Because if I'd confronted him too early, he would have disappeared. If I'd stayed silent, he would have succeeded. If I'd shouted, no one would have listened. Instead, I waited. And waiting, when paired with truth, is a form of strength most people underestimate. Every so often, Lily will still ask my opinion on something important. A merger. A new relationship. A gut feeling she can't quite explain. And every time, I give it honestly. Not as a warning. Not as control. Just as presence. That's what she needed back then. Not a savior. Not a hero. Just someone who stayed calm when the room turned hostile. Someone who trusted the truth enough to let it surface on its own. He tried to use shame as a weapon. He forgot that shame dissolves in the presence of clarity. He tried to isolate her. He forgot that real love doesn't compete, it waits. And when the moment came, he wasn't undone by anger. He was undone by patience. That's the part people don't talk about. Not the accusation. Not the arrest. Not the sentence. The patience. Because in the end, that's what saved her. And that's what brought us here years later, sharing quiet meals, honest conversations, and a trust that's stronger precisely because it was tested. He thought he was exposing me. What he exposed instead was everything he was hiding. And when the truth finally stood up and spoke, there was nothing left for him to say. Eventually, even the echoes faded. The story stopped being something Lily carried with her every day and became something that lived quietly in the background, like a scar you forget about until you notice it one morning and realize it doesn't hurt anymore. That's when I knew she was truly free of him. Not when he was sentenced. Not when the letters stopped coming. But when his shadow no longer influenced her choices. One Sunday afternoon, years later, Lily was at my house helping me trim the hedges. She paused suddenly and laughed. "What?" I asked. "I just realized something," she said. "I haven't thought about him in months." There was no bitterness in her voice. No triumph. Just surprise. "That's a good sign," I said. "It is," she agreed. For a long time, I was afraid forgetting would mean I hadn't learned anything. She wiped her hands on her jeans and looked at me. "But I did learn. I just don't need the reminder anymore." That was the moment I finally let go of my own vigilance. For a long time after everything happened, I'd stayed alert in ways I hadn't before. Watching people around her. Reading faces. Listening for tones that didn't match the words. Old habits sharpened by fear. But standing there in the yard, watching my daughter laugh freely again, I understood something important. My job wasn't to guard her forever. It was to help her recognize danger on her own and trust herself when she did. She didn't need a shield anymore. She had vision. On the 10th anniversary of her company, she invited me to a small private celebration. Nothing public. No press. Just the people who had been there through the hard years. Near the end of the night, she pulled me aside. "I never thanked you properly," she said. "You've thanked me plenty," I replied. She shook her head. "No. I mean for not forcing me to believe you before I was ready." I thought about that. "I trusted the truth," I said. "Not my ego." She smiled at that. That's the difference. As the night wound down, I watched her move through the room confident, grounded, unhurried. Not the woman she'd been before him. And not diminished by what he tried to do to her. Stronger. More aware. More herself. People like him rely on urgency. On confusion. On the fear of being alone. What they never account for is time. Time exposes inconsistencies. Time reveals patterns. Time rewards patience. He believed he was orchestrating a perfect moment. He didn't realize he was stepping into one that had already been prepared. I sometimes think about what I'd say to someone facing something similar now. Someone standing at the edge of a public accusation, feeling the walls close in. I wouldn't tell them to fight louder. I'd tell them to slow down. To breathe. To let the truth finish unfolding. Because lies are exhausting. They require maintenance. Adjustments. New explanations stacked on old ones. Truth doesn't. It just waits. And when it finally speaks, it doesn't shout. It ends things. That's how it ended for him. And that's how it continues for us. Not as a story about betrayal. But as a quiet reminder that patience, clarity, and real love outlast even the most carefully constructed lies. The last time Lily and I talked about that night, it was almost incidental. We were sitting on the porch as the sun went down, neither of us saying much. She'd come by after work, tired but content, the way people look when their life finally feels aligned. Out of nowhere, she said, "You know, for a long time I thought strength meant proving people wrong." I waited. "Now I think it means not needing to," she continued. "Just living well. Quietly. Honestly." I smiled, because that was the lesson I'd hoped she'd reach on her own. He tried to define us through accusation. Through shame. Through a moment designed to strip everything away. Instead, that moment revealed what couldn't be taken. Her integrity. Her resilience. Our bond. People still remember the drama of that night, the silence, the arrest, the shock. They talk about it like it was the climax. But for me, the real ending is much simpler. It's Sunday dinners. It's phone calls asking, "Can I get your take on this?" It's the sound of my daughter laughing without hesitation. It's knowing that when someone tried to break her world, she rebuilt it stronger and didn't lose herself in the process. He wanted control. What he forgot was this. Truth doesn't need to be defended forever. Love doesn't need to be loud. And patience, when paired with clarity, always outlasts deception. He accused me of embezzling $50,000. What he actually did was remind me how much my daughter was worth fighting for. And in the end, he walked away in handcuffs. While I walked away with my family, my name, and my peace intact. That's how it really ends. Not with revenge. Not with noise. But with everything that mattered still standing.